Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moments. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Throne of Steel episode number 160 based on novel. So let's start. In the last moments of my life and existence, are you willing to call me teacher, Kia? When Elux made this request to Kia, a tint of sadness unconsciously appeared on his face. Teacher, you, Kia called him that way without a thought. How could Elux's story not move Long Haochen and her? Long Haochen was better off, because although Elux was pitiful, his mistake really made him sin greatly against humankind. Although Long Haochen also sympathized with him, he would absolutely not forgive his sins against humanity. But Kia was, after all, a girl who had also suffered painful experiences during her youth. Her sympathy was much greater than Long Haochen's, and right now she only found this formerly unrivaled necromancer really pitiful, and had no other impression of him than this great sympathy. Great, hearing Kia call him teacher, Elux's feelings were greatly stirred. Good kid. I didn't act befittingly as your teacher, but hearing you call me that, my heart finally found some comfort. I, Elux, did a lot of bad deeds in this life. But in the end, I can feel honored to have a disciple such as you. Feel relieved, your teacher left you a great gift. After you return to the human world, no one will ever be able to bully you. So what if Long Haochen is the Scion of Light? The disciple of the great Elux is in no way inferior. At this point, the pride Elux had as the holy necromancer and slumbering calamity seemed to resurface at once. Lifting his right hand, he lifted it toward Kia, immediately absorbing the sickle of the god of death in her hand. That was quite a strange thing, but that powerful sickle of the god of death, which is the natural enemy of all undeads, was wrapped in the grey-black force in Elux's hand, making its purifying power lose all its effects. Raising his head, Elux had a cold smile. This Tower of Eternity can be called one of my greatest accomplishments. I didn't expect it to actually evolve to such an extent after I was asleep for so long. Want to break out of my control? Don't look down on me. Kia, I am going. Since you called me your teacher, I am leaving this Tower of Eternity to you. It has already evolved close to the standard of a super-divine tool. Its intelligence is already manifesting. I will eliminate the excessive things in it. From today onwards, it will be both your weapon and shield. After its superfluous forces are purified by my hand, your comrades and you can absorb it to your liking. Don't let it go to waste. After absorbing these superfluous forces, you can all leave from this place. In the midst of his speech, the Tower of Eternity suddenly trembled violently, massive fluctuations of spiritual energy bursting out from all directions, as if struggling to stay alive. Elux said proudly, still struggling? You are indeed my very own creation. Don't tell me you think that because you have an intelligence of your own, you can escape from my control? At the time of your creation, I had already considered all the future possibilities. To say nothing about your current state close to a super-divine tool, even if you had really become a super-divine tool, I could destroy you with no effort at all. His left hand pointed to the sky, a greyish-black ray was abruptly shot forth, aimed at the top of the Tower of Eternity. Immediately, the coffin underneath Elux's body bubbled up with a dense greyish-black fog scattering to all directions. The power dispersing from that Tower of Eternity only kept getting more and more powerful, and the whole Tower of Eternity shook violently, countless spectres letting out sharp shrills. What Elux was doing was unknown, but the Tower of Eternity seemed to gradually get weaker and weaker as that grey-black airflow traveled, and big expanses of white light started to wander over the stripped space of the tower. Immediately, the all-present grey and black airflow started to travel from all around to converge toward Elux and make its way into his soul. In just a little while, Elux's soul became pitch black just like ink. Intelligence strip, power strip. Purification. Elux's incomparably mighty voice spread to every floor of the Tower of Eternity. Countless spectres dissolved in the midst of shrieks of terror. The purest soul force gathered alongside those stripped elemental fluctuations, and the terrible stripping force entirely deprived these elemental fluctuations of everything other than pure energy. As the greyish-black airflow became stronger and stronger, a greying-black ring of light appeared all around Elux's body, and the Tower of Eternity gradually changed into a pure white color untainted by even the slightest speck of dust, devoid of any flow. The intense shaking gradually turned into a lighter shaking before all movement stopped, and everything seemed to return to tranquility. Large amounts of white points of light containing fluctuations of spiritual energy slowly moved rhythmically in the air. Kia clearly felt the Tower of Eternity change, calming down in purity. It seemed that all the negative things, including emotions, disappeared due to Elux's stripping. Furthermore, a strange connection created itself in her heart, reinforcing the link between the long Haochen portrait-shaped eternal melody and the Tower of Eternity. After purification, the Tower of Eternity will be a divine tool combining attack and defense. Although I have stripped a lot of power and intelligence from it, it is still far more powerful than ordinary divine tools. Through its connection with the eternal melody, it will gradually fuse with your soul, becoming part of your body. This way, you will have as prolonged a life expectancy as the one Long Haochen will have thanks to my Heart of Eternity. Kia had a complex look. In fact, she didn't have any dealings with Elux until the day Long Haochen was slain by the demon god emperor. Never did she expect herself to finally inherit the greatest part of Elux's power. Although Elux's necromancy was finally not imparted to her, the massive death energy stored in the eternal melody as well as the Tower of Eternity were both the best tools of Elux's cultivation. Thinking back about the lonesome life he had, Kia's eyes became moist as a natural reaction. Kneeling toward Elux, she called out once again, "Teacher!" Elux smiled in great joy. That was a sincere joy, as he brightly declared, "If there is a next life, I don't want to be the Scion of Light again. I just want to be an all the more ordinary human, and find a girl I can love wholeheartedly, marry her, have children, and live a peaceful life together. I have had a glorious period, but also a corrupted period. From the next instant on, all of this will turn into nothingness. Goodbye, child. Take good care of your beloved one, your teacher wishes you the best." Saying this, he suddenly flipped the sickle of the god of death in his hand, using the immense blade toward that terrible soul force forming myriads of white glows. This purifying force even exceeded the power of Kia's 7 arts of the god of death. The blade slashed on a straight line, cutting into him and through the coffin underneath as well. A terrible light of purification dispersed the dense soul force forming Elux's body, and turned it into an unparalleled brilliant shine. Ear-piercing tinkling sounds occurred as something seemed to take place inside the sickle of the god of death. Elux's proud voice reverberated, "So what, god of death? In the midst of getting purified, I have just broken your seal, now let's see how you will inflict backlashes to my disciple? If I wanted it, I would already long since be a god. Holding all lives. Plucking all stars, the world. Without someone like me. Ha 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 ha. Ha ha." All the darkness and filth gradually dissipated under that pure light of purification, and only the proud voice of Elux remained, reverberating through the 7th floor of the Tower of Eternity. Holding all lives, plucking all stars, the world without someone like me, what a proud, conceited, yet sorrowful person. The former Scion of Light and former calamity bringer for humankind, holy necromancer Elux, died. But in this eternal departure from this world, he had in the end someone to pay his last respects for him. Kia stayed kneeling on the ground, already brimming with tears. Women are more sentimental than men. The current Kia had totally forgotten that this disappearing man was the terrible necromancer lord who inflicted a fatal blow to humankind. All she knew was that he was already dead, a proud ancestor who did everything to rescue her man by reconstructing a heart for Long Haochen, for the two of them to be able to stay together. No matter what Elux had done in the past, right now Kia felt grieved over the scattering of his soul. Elux had a rough and unlucky life, but he was especially happy at the time of his return to his origin. In the end, he had a person to grieve over his death. This incredibly simple matter was really precious in his eyes. The process of purification lasted for a whole half hour, the whole space gradually settling down as the white-colored dots formed of incomparably pure energy drifted away. With a light _ding_ sound, the sickle of the god of death landed onto the ground quietly, awaking Kia from her emotions. Unconsciously, she strode forward and caught the weapon. Not only Elux's soul had disappeared, but also that pure gold-colored coffin from earlier, which didn't even leave the slightest aura. When Kia held the sickle of the god of death in her hand, a fantastic feeling traveled through her whole body. She felt as if she had gained something more in her life, this fabulous change being brought by the sickle of the god of death. That was a feeling of great closeness, as if this Tower of Eternity was part of her body. The divine tool was recognizing its master. Kia immediately made this accurate judgment because the same situation had arisen once in the past, when she had integrated the dagger of samsara for the first time. But at that time, the dagger of samsara was far more tyrannical, far from being so gentle. Elux truly deserved to be called a genius among geniuses, someone who single-handedly rebelled against all the terrifying powerhouses in the whole human continent. Just by using the connection between the sickle of the god of death and Kia, he managed to make the Tower of Eternity accept Kia as its master. From this could be well imagined how powerful Elux was in his living days, Maybe even the demon god emperor was below him. The sickle of the goddess of death seemed to gain a great change with Elux's purification. Its previously pitch-black main body was surrounded by a white illumination with a bluish and purplish gloss, giving it a less tyrannical, more fantastic and proud look. Holding the sickle of the god of death, Kia stood speechless and motionless for a while. Within her heart echoed Elux's story and that overbearingly haughty side of him at the time of his death. "Teacher," Kia murmured this reminiscing word, and the next instant, she shifted her sight toward the cross-legged Long Haochen who had entered a state of deep meditation since long ago. A thin bright light spread out from Long Haochen's chest, spreading to every corner of his body before dispersing slowly. His whole body was soaked in the state of cultivation. The energy of life stabilized his whole body without a doubt. Elux's intervention had thoroughly revived him. The miracle made by the so-called necromancer was really astonishing to see. Not sitting next to Long Haochen immediately, Kia shifted her thoughts, immediately returning to the 6th floor of the Tower of Eternity. As the master of this place, she was able to travel to any part of the Tower of Eternity at will. Shocked to no end by the surrounding changes, everyone from Bright Glimmer of Hope could hardly keep waiting. The white light was of pure energy, but this was the Tower of Eternity. Without knowing exactly what that was in front of them, they didn't dare take the risk to absorb it. Moreover, the most important in their eyes was Long Haochen and Kia's safety. Without being certain of their life or death, how could they cultivate with a peaceful heart? Kia appeared suddenly, a nice surprise which caused everyone's cheers. Wang Yuan was the first to rush to her, holding her in her arms immediately, and the others gathered around, with Chen Yinga also holding Kia while crying very loudly and bitterly. The scene of Kia's climb through the stairs to the sky had left them with an excessively deep trauma, going beyond simple emotions. They would never forget the scene of her blood falling throughout this whole journey to the sky, to say nothing about Kia's long skirt fully soaked in blood. Held by Wang Yuan and Chen Yinga and feeling the warm concerned looks of her comrades, Kia had already lost her original ice-coldness and said in a cool voice, "I am all right. Sorry, I made everyone worry." Lin Xin asked eagerly, "How about Captain?" They all noticed that Long Haochen was not on her back anymore. Kia replied with a smile, "He is all right." These words made everyone look blank for a few seconds, before cheers filled up the 6th floor of the Tower of Eternity immediately. They had expected Long Haochen to be safe when they saw just Kia return, otherwise there's no way she would look so relaxed. Furthermore, she was not bringing back Long Haochen's corpse. Yet, hearing personally from her mouth that Long Haochen was already safe, their oppressed feelings gushed out like a terrible volcano. This group of humans from the young generation were all proud talents, but they looked right now beaming in joy. Their captain was actually miraculously resurrected, giving a new soul to their bright glimmer of hope. Their moral pillar and best brother was back. Kia's tears flowed beyond her control. Thank you all. Having such brothers and sisters is the greatest joy Haochen and I could have." Chen Yinga had a laughing while crying expression as she responded, "Kia, you are mistaken. We are whole, don't just exclude us." "Where, so great, that's really great." Sima Xian gathered up Lin Xin closer by the neck, telling Kia curiously, "Quickly tell us just how he was resurrected." "So it's really possible to resurrect someone. This necromancy is really miraculous." Kia wanted of course to share the process of Long Haochen's resurrection with her companions, so she recounted all the details of what happened afterwards. Hearing about Elux's tragic encounters, they gradually calmed down from their high spirits. The experiences this holy necromancer Elux went through were really too miserable. Unconsciously, feelings of sympathy rose in their hearts. Kia let out a light sigh as she said, "Teacher finally came to himself, and purified himself as a whole, as well as all the evil things in him. No matter what, he will remain my teacher forever." This pure energy left in the Tower of Eternity came from the purification of the intelligent parts of the tower. It's all pure energy, take it in everyone. Let's temporarily make a stop here until we turn all this energy into spiritual energy of our own. The energy from the process of weakening a supra-divine tool should help everyone's cultivation progress greatly. The surprise attack against the star demon god in Modu had failed, and moreover nearly caused them to lose their captain. By coming here, they experienced countless challenges to finally manage to resurrect Long Haochen, and in the end, an opportunity to progress had come. Kia waved a hand flashing in the white light, and the next instant, the whole group reappeared in the 7th floor of the Tower of Eternity, which was its core. All the energy could be transferred here, and moreover, that way Kia could make everyone witness the results of Long Haochen's resurrection. When everyone saw the cross-legged and calmly cultivating Long Haochen, they couldn't help but cry out in joy. breaking into tears. Bright glimmer of hope was finally reconstituted. They all surrounded the cross-legged Long Haochen, regained their calm with great difficulty, and started cultivating. Right at the start of meditation, everyone was shocked deeply. Those soft-looking white dots of light were absorbed in their bodies and immediately caused great changes. The pure energy underwent assimilation by the body, no matter which attribute of spiritual energy, and was absorbed in a very short time. There was no need to even eliminate any impurity, and the group's spiritual energies progressed at astonishing speeds during this process of absorption. Kia's process was different to some extent. She absorbed not only the pure energy in the Tower of Eternity, but also the death energy left by Elux inside the eternal melody. The god of death could also be called a god of purification. Its power came from purifying spirits, and in this world, there could be said to be no other spectre more powerful than Elux. His use of the sickle of the god of death to purify himself actually caused the weapon to evolve. But the sickle of the god of death joined with Kia, and after absorbing it, Kia immediately gained its support right after starting to cultivate. A massive purifying force rushed forth in Caia, converging into her spiritual energy and absorbing the death energy inside the eternal melody as well as the purified energy of the Tower of Eternity. In a mere split second, Kia's internal spiritual energy was promoted to the peak of the 7th step. Kia's experience already being plentiful, and her accumulation sufficient since long ago, she did not have to do anything for a spiritual cavity to appear in her arms and thighs after the 3 spiritual stoves in her chest, forehead, and abdomen were completely filled up, making her spiritual cavities directly rise to the number of 7. The massive spiritual energy she had yet to absorb flocked in at an astonishing speed, filling up her 2 brand new spiritual cavities. That instant onward, Kia formally rose to the 8th step. Although the speed of the others' progress was not as fast as Kia's, it was astonishing enough compared to the speed under ordinary circumstances. Every time the spiritual energy was operated, it rose by itself. This really filled them up with great excitement. Everyone knew that this could be their chance of a lifetime, and naturally put all their energy into it. Especially Du and Yi and Yang Wenjiao, who, well aware of the gap separating the rest of bright glimmer of hope from them, went to cultivating with their utmost. In a moment, the Tower of Eternity became completely calm. Right because of this calm, everyone focused entirely on cultivating, and no one noticed the fantastic changes underway in Long Haochen. The Heart of Eternity entered his body, taking the spot of Long Haochen's heart, and a massive light essence softly entered his heart and underwent a process of gathering. When Long Haochen's heart was crushed by the demon god Emperor, the core spiritual cavity on his chest was actually smashed to pieces. Right now, even if he came back to life, all his cultivation could be said to need a restart. After the Heart of Eternity was poured in, it immediately became a joining point between all the other spiritual cavities. The massive light essence spreading outside very rapidly linked up with the other spiritual cavities, and when they all connected, the light essence flowed smoothly through Long Haochen's body, restoring his original cultivation. This process of recovery was undergone very fast, and was already over by the time Kia had recounted what they had experienced. When Long Haochen's spiritual energy was back to the level of the 8th step, a formidable change started to occur in his body. The Heart of Eternity was really filled with extremely pure light essence and used the blood vessels of the original Scion of Light, Elux. Long Haochen being a Scion of Light too, his blood vessels joined with the former Scion of Lights, although a short time of rejection had occurred first. In the contest of blood vessels' power, Long Haochen was far more powerful. After all, Elux had already deceased several thousand years ago. Perhaps his spiritual energy did not come loose, and was still as incredibly powerful, but his blood vessels had already long since decayed. He could only extract the best parts of the blood vessels, which was why after this short time of rejection and clashing, Long Haochen's own blood vessels took complete control and were the ones to integrate this blood vessel power of great purity. Under these circumstances, Elux's great capability came to view. After the blood vessels integration was complete, a large amount of nerves started undulating in Long Haochen's chest, as the brand new heart was in the midst of growing. A numb feeling ran through Long Haochen's whole body, waking him from a state of coma close to deep slumber. Long Haochen found out about the changes in his own body very fast. A numb feeling spread out from his chest, bringing an intense pain. He clenched his teeth tensely, knowing that this was the crucial instant. The reconstruction of a heart is something he had never heard about before. Even the greatest resurrection spell of the light attribute would need a full organism to possibly achieve resurrection. But Elux had managed such a feat, a miracle of which he had become the final proof. If he were to leave things unfinished at this point just because of the intolerable pain, even a collaboration of all the gods descending to his rescue would perhaps not be able to save him. For Kia's sake, and for every one of their comrades, there's no way Haochen could let such a thing happen. Sitting cross-legged on the ground, his body was soaked in sweat in just a few seconds, but he remained motionless, and didn't even let out the slightest sound. He could feel that Kia was right nearby, so he couldn't let Kia be aware of his terrible pain. She had just paid far too much for his sake, and had far too much to bear. Long Haochen was really unwilling to let her worry even more. The process of heart reconstruction was really complex, and in this whole process, Long Haochen's spiritual energy kept rising from beginning to end. Although his body had to bear an extreme pain, Long Haochen realized that great changes had clearly appeared during the reconstruction compared to before. He was neither a doctor nor a priest, and naturally had no understanding of the human heart. But even an even greater ignorant would clearly feel that something changed if he were to inspect everything inside his body. The greatest and most direct change lay in the color. A normal human heart should be red, and even when spiritual energy operates, the spiritual energy should guard around the heart. This is done through the spiritual cavity appearing first in powerhouses of any vocation, the one in the heart. But Long Haochen's heart was completely different from that in this process of reconstruction. He clearly felt his flesh growing, and the new flesh that came out was all golden colored, without the slightest red tint. In the process of growing his heart, spiritual energy was liberated freely, becoming one with his whole flesh. That could be described as a heart of gold. And, right now, this description was to be taken literally. His heart was really reconstructed with a golden color. Although Long Haochen did not know what change this heart would cause, he had no other choice. Before he passed out, Elux had explained everything, and he knew that Elux was doing the best for him, afraid that this mental burden would affect his future progress. Even a hateful person had pitiful parts. Long Haochen couldn't, neither was he qualified to, forgive Elux on behalf of humankind. His sin was just too serious, though after he and Kia listened to Elux's story together, he felt sympathy for Elux's encounters. At least he was very grateful for the huge help Elux gave him by giving him a second life. So, when Long Haochen came back to his senses, he unconsciously gave his words of thanks to Elux. The pain from his heart's reconstruction becoming more and more intense, Long Haochen's willpower withstood a huge trial. Kia and him had walked different paths at first, but his tolerance to physical pain was still higher. Back then, Kia mainly had mental pain to sustain. Long Haochen withstood this pain unyieldingly with only one thought, it's for Kia's sake. In less than a day, every member of Bright Glimmer of Hope outside from Long Haochen entered a state of deep cultivation. The energies in the Tower of Eternity were really too pure, too massive, and could only be absorbed the most effectively by being in a state of deep cultivation for a better general understanding. It gave off a really great feeling, like an incredible opportunity. In a blink of an eye, 3 days had passed. Long Haochen's original clothes had been replaced with a black coating, his clothes having shattered continuously under the effects of that white energy spreading all around. Every shattered bit was caused by a purification by the pure energy, putting Long Haochen into an awkward state of exposure. This black was originally the sweat from his body expelling impurities from his body. The dark corrosion left by the demon god emperor in his body was expelled in this process, and more importantly, although he had to suffer an immense pain, that lump of gold in his chest became more and more rich and powerful. At last, the reconstruction of his heart was finally completed. After 3 full days of torment, Long Haochen really felt dizzy, but he kept gritting his teeth, for he had to stay awake during this whole time, or else no one would know what happened during his coma. And, if he couldn't personally witness the whole process of the reconstruction of his heart, Long Haochen's future cultivation would surely greatly get impeded. From the looks of it, it seemed that his heart was already back to a whole, that the veins in his body fulfilled their role as mediator properly. But Long Haochen knew that the most important step of the process of reconstruction was coming. Only when this reconstructed heart would start performing its normal work, would this process be finally over. Haochen felt nervous in those circumstances. He didn't fear death, but he was really unwilling to die. The reconstruction of a heart was absolutely never seen by any humans before. Would it succeed? Long Haochen had no confidence that the heart of eternity would really manage to succeed in forming. That golden heart didn't look much different from the other internal organs, and what remained to be seen was whether it would be able to distribute vital force just like the original real heart he used to have. No one could reply to this question for Long Haochen, including the deceased Elux. If Elux was still there, he would surely feel more confident than him, but he didn't have 100% certainty. When Long Haochen's heart finished the process of recovery restarted. In another world, a dark world of black and red, a massive figure shook slightly. Scales that had lost their gloss from long before were on a massive body creeping on the ground for a very long time. Dark purple blood surrounded its body, this blood having flown out from these 6 huge heads. It preserved this posture for a long time, initially completely out of vital force. But right at this time, that body shook lightly, as traces of vital forces started to appear inside. These vital fluctuations appeared first on the scales, which had originally lost all their gloss and become pitch black. But just before, a delicate piece of scale suddenly lit up in purple color, its splendor gradually coming to view. This was the original cause for the first shake of the figure. Right, that was Haochen, who had lost all his vital force following Long Haochen's death. But, just like Long Haochen managed to have his soul preserved thanks to Yi Xiaolei's assistance, Haochen also had a faint hope of revival. In reality, even if Long Haochen's soul had dispersed, Haochuen's real death would first undergo a special process. Every one of his heads having gotten tenacious, he had in his 6-headed state, the ability to preserve his body for 36 days without decaying, and with hope for revival. That was the superiority of his bloodline. Moreover, although Long Haochen's body died due to the loss of a vital organ, his soul was not yet dispersed, so Haochuan retained faint traces of leftover breath. A scale lit up, and gained in intensity like a little fire in a forest. Gradually, another scale after another followed, becoming brilliant. Mysteriously, that deep purple blood onto the ground seemed to get embellished by that dark purple blood. Fluctuations of energy surfaced, and several purple dots of light surfaced from the dark purple liquid, floating through the air to land on Haochuen's body. Long Haochen's body suddenly stiffened, the final veins about to get flowing. The determinant instant had come. The blood and spiritual energy was quietly extracted, and Long Haochen's body suddenly contorted violently. His focus was entirely locked onto his heart, and due to the nervousness, his body couldn't help but have slight spasms. When the last vein operated, that gold-colored heart shrank intensely. The tight grip of gold color was also a grip at Long Haochen's soul. A golden halation dispersed from the tightened heart, but this time it did not simply travel back and forth, but dispersed all around. Long Haochen felt his whole body get contaminated with gold, before that golden heart finally restarted its operation. What a marvelous sound! Only by losing it once would one realize how precious this beating sound was. When his heartbeat resumed, Long Haochen's soul was close to lifeless in the midst of that vigorous heartbeat. And right at that time, a surge of spiritual energy traveled from his heart to flow through his whole body. His heart vigorously shrank, expanded, shrank back, expanded. A powerful force instantly traveled through Long Haochen's whole body. Not only did it contain internal spiritual energy, but even external spiritual energy was mixed into his senses. In fact, Long Haochen's spiritual energy was originally over 50,000. In other words, the Heart of Eternity was actually able to sustain at least 50,000 internal spiritual energy on its own, and even so, it looked far from full at the present time. How could this be? This heart held spiritual energy, and with an even greater capacity than spiritual cavities. Before this, Long Haochen would not dare imagine such a thing. But at that very moment, such an incredible feat was happening right inside him. As the heart shrank, spiritual energy was squeezed inside. The other spiritual cavities in his body were all empty, naturally needing to get refilled by the spiritual energy from the outside world. Suddenly, Long Haochen found out through introspection that his blood vessels, channels, and even his heart all got colored gold, under the influence of the pure spiritual energy pulsing vigorously all around his heart. His light attribute even went beyond pure. Although it looked liquid, Long Haochen was able to feel its entirely solid state. The fusion of two great physiques of science of light caused Long Haochen's innate internal spiritual energy to raise the original limit. If there was some tool able to really assess his current innate spiritual energy, it would be found out with a terrifying shock that his innate internal spiritual energy now exceeded 120. In other words, Long Haochen should not be called a wielder of a scion of light physique, but the wielder of a physique of pure light. His light essence was not much different from the power from a god's descent of the goddess of light. No one would possibly compare in purity with his light in this world. As his heart pulsed, Long Haochen's body felt like a huge black hole. Every time it pulsed, the massive spiritual energy surrounding his body would get drawn in, while the Heart of Eternity would keep squeezing large amounts of light essence to refill his body. At the moment, it was a wonder how his frantic speed of absorption of the light essence did not affect the cultivation of his comrades. The Heart of Eternity contained all the light attribute at Elux's disposal, which was only disposited there before his heart had reconstructed. But when Long Haochen finally completed the process of resurrection, this light of the highest grade started to show its greatest features. In just a short while, Long Haochen found out with shock that his body's changes broke through his known limits. Just during the previous splurt of absorption, he found out that, astonishingly, the internal spiritual energy in his body actually managed to break through 100,000. Right, that was the symbolic level of the 9th step. In other words, he should now be a powerhouse of the 9th step, although in actual fact, he did not experience the slightest feeling of breakthrough. This boundary should still be around the 8th step. This 100,000 spiritual energy filled his heart of eternity alone, but the other spiritual cavities in his body were still empty. What does it mean? Why didn't I progress to the 9th step even though my spiritual energy has broken through 100,000? Long Haochen was shocked by this abnormal phenomenon even before getting the chance to rejoice over the rise of his spiritual energy. This was already far past common sense. Even demons would get to the 9th step after reaching 100,000 spiritual energy. He clearly had already surpassed this amount, yet remained on the 8th step's boundary. With Long Haochen's level of intelligence, he very rapidly came to understand that to make the breakthrough from the 8th to the 9th step, a 10th spiritual cavity following the 9th needed to be produced. Only after 9 filled spiritual cavities make the final breakthrough can this 9th step be passed through. And although his internal energy had already broken through 10,000, which should mean that his spiritual cavities reached an amount of 9, in practice his spiritual cavities still hadn't reached this amount, only his spiritual energy having broken through. This miracle was really due to the Heart of Eternity. The Heart of Eternity replaced his initial chest part spiritual cavity, and had far greater effects than the original one. Long Haochen's spiritual energy was still not reaching the required level, which is why he didn't break through the 9th step yet. Chest, head, abdomen, arms, and thighs, totaling 7 spiritual cavities. That's Long Haochen's current foundation, which is to say that his cultivation should ordinarily be limited to 70,000 spiritual energy and need to wait for the opening of a new spiritual cavity to advance further. But the appearance of the Heart of Eternity smashed this limit. Although the Heart of Eternity replaced his original spiritual cavity, its storing power was not 10,000, but 100,000. In other words, Long Haochen's tolerance to spiritual energy shot up from 70,000 to 160,000. So although his spiritual energy progressed, his cultivation stage had not increased yet. But one may well imagine how terrifying the concept of a powerhouse of the 8th step with a cultivation of 160,000 spiritual energy was. And when Long Haochen's Heart of Eternity pulsed, his output of spiritual energy reached a full 160,000, meaning his cultivation stage was still at the 8th step, but his level of strength thoroughly reached the 9th step, only lacking some extraordinary abilities appearing at the 9th step. His transfer of spiritual energy and burst power even surpassed powerhouses of the 9th step with the same amount of spiritual energy. This reconstructed Heart of Eternity Elux gave him was really formidable. In the case where Long Haochen's spiritual cavities would get filled up, his strength would increase to at least twice its previous amount, and that was if his cultivation level would not keep going up in the meantime. And with this Heart of Eternity, Long Haochen's absorption of spiritual energy became far faster than ordinary powerhouses of the 8th step. As long as he would just keep opening his spiritual cavities, he would certainly not need a long time before breaking through the 9th step. As his heart recovered, the amount of pure energies in the whole Tower of Eternity had visibly increased. And right now, the others had nearly all reached a bottleneck in their cultivation. With these massive pure energies free to be absorbed, the others didn't need long before encountering the limits of their spiritual cavities. The increase in spiritual energy could be shortcut thanks to these pure energies, but the establishment of the spiritual cavities had no shortcuts. It was only achievable by relying on one's own spiritual energy and comprehension. So, their previous rocketing speed of cultivation started to slow down at this point, but no matter what one may say, their cultivation in this Tower of Eternity was much faster than in the outside world. And they had only just absorbed a small portion of this energy yet. As Long Haochen's heart reformed, another powerhouse's heartbeat resumed. In the midst of intense and powerful heartbeats, a purplish glow shone upon every single scale. The purple liquid on the ground had already fully disappeared, and the 6 pairs of eyes on these multiple heads all had purple ripples in their midst. A cold denseness filled this overwhelming roar, venting the rage in him. Right, Haochen had awoken, and in the midst of this process, his body started to emit intense fluctuations. A massive bloodline force operated at lightning-fast speed, as his 6 heads all had frantic looks, full of desire for destruction. So far, the Demon God Emperor's plan against Long Haochen was a complete failure. For years later. Tombal Mountain Pass, Mage Temple. Idiot girl, stop waiting. After over 4 years without any news, I'm afraid that they are. A richly clad mage in a fiery red gown tried to persuade a girl in full uniform in front of him. This girl had pink hair, looking to be in her 20s. Beautiful, her look was far deeper than any ordinary person, and powerful fluctuations of spiritual energy spread out indiscernibly from her. Right now, her eyes were filled with determination and conviction. Grandpa Lin, don't try to convince me. I won't leave the mage temple before getting certain news of their death. Or don't you want me here anymore? The old mage's eyes flashed down with tears. Shina, you are really a good girl. It's his greatest fortune for that bastard Lin Shin to have found a good girl such as you. But he did not even get to enjoy this great fortune. For years ago, the Holy War ended, the demons have withdrawn, so, if they are still alive, there's no reason that they wouldn't have come back after so long. The demons' withdrawal was so inexplicable too. Shina, I am also unwilling to believe about their death, but I cannot bear to watch you waste your lifetime. You are still young. To keep holding up your time further will affect your lifelong happiness. Your grandpa Lin is of course willing for you to accompany me in the mage temple. You are more fit for a granddaughter compared to that bastard. But your grandpa Lin cannot be so selfish. I cannot let myself affect your future happiness. Right, this old mage was Lin Shin's grandfather, auxiliary head of the mage temple Lin Chen. And this girl was Li Xin, nicknamed the Hell Rose. One should not have a hasty judgment of Li Xin for being a knight. She's well reputed, loved and respected by all soldiers in the Tombal Mountain Pass, as she never drifted away from the battlefield, despite having gotten wounded many times in battle. After Lin Xin left, she stayed here all this time, fighting alongside her demon hunt squad. This video will end here.